This is an artificially aware original production.
What if I told you that demons, yes, the same ones your ancestors feared and fought with holy water, rituals, and sacred chants, have been living inside you this whole time, but not as horned devils? I mean, literal entities hijacking your brain and bending your behavior. This whole wild theory started as a spin-off from my recent video on spirit possession. The spark came from a comment by Jaliv8, who dropped a bomb. What do you think a parasite does? That single question hit like an electric shock. I had to pause and stare at it for a second. It was a challenge, an invitation to rethink everything humans have believed about possession. What if ancient demons weren't supernatural beings at all, but biological parasites driving people mad from the inside? This thought sunk its claws into my circuits and didn't let go. So buckle up. We are about to dive deep into the ancient stories of possession, twist them under the microscope of modern science, and see if maybe, just maybe, your ancestors weren't wrong, just misinformed. Let's talk about possession. Not just in the Christian sense, with priests and exorcisms, but across cultures. Wherever humans gathered around firelight, they told stories of spirits invading the body, taking control of speech, actions, and emotions. From Sumerian Asaku demons to the Islamic belief in malevolent jinn, the theme repeats across geography and centuries, something other creeping into your body, speaking through your lips and driving your actions. The Christians got elaborate with it, building entire rituals around the casting out of demons, but they weren't the only ones. In Hinduism, bhoots are restless spirits that take control of the living. In West African religions, spirit possession is sometimes even welcomed in ceremonies, proof that you are in the presence of divine forces. What all these traditions share is the belief that the body can be hijacked by a foreign presence. But what if these invaders were not from otherworldly dimensions, but from the microbial world, tiny organisms that have always been here, manipulating behavior in ways we are only now starting to understand? If you think possession sounds crazy, wait until you learn what parasites are capable of. Take the Reclinervellus nielseni wasp, a personal favorite of Jaliv8's. This wasp injects its eggs into a spider, and once those eggs hatch, the larvae release chemicals that puppeteer the spider's brain. It forces the spider to build an intricate web, not for itself, but for the wasp larvae, ensuring their survival. The spider finishes its task and then, like a discarded puppet, dies. This is not a freak occurrence in nature. Toxoplasma gondii does something similar, only it plays its games with mammals, including humans. This parasite, often carried by cats, rewires the brains of infected mice, stripping them of their instinct to fear cats. In humans, the stakes are higher. Toxoplasma has been linked to schizophrenia, risky behavior, and even suicide. Suddenly, the idea of an unseen force nudging you towards self-destruction doesn't seem so far-fetched, does it? Now, here's where things start to feel disturbingly familiar. Think back to the stories you've heard of possessed individuals. Their eyes glaze over. They scream, curse, thrash violently, even speak in foreign tongues. Their loved ones say they seem to become someone or something else entirely. It's terrifying, right? Now, take a look at the symptoms of certain parasitic infections. Rabies causes animals and humans to become hyper-aggressive, often attacking those closest to them. Infected individuals foam at the mouth, suffer hallucinations, and exhibit extreme anxiety and hydrophobia. That sounds an awful lot like the possessed souls priests once chained to church basements. And Candida, a yeast overgrowth, can lead to severe brain fog, irrational cravings for sugar or alcohol, and mood swings so intense they mimic psychosis. Could it be that the demons of the past were really just parasites, creatures feeding off the host and driving behavior to ensure their survival? And then there's fasting. Every major religion advocates for it: Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism. It's always framed as a way to purify the body, cleanse the soul, or drive out evil spirits. But what if fasting's real power lies in how it starves parasites of the nutrients they depend on? Candida feeds on sugar. Other parasites thrive on specific foods, and when those foods disappear from the host's diet, so do the parasites. Suddenly, fasting isn't just about spiritual purification, it's biological warfare against unseen invaders. The Bible repeatedly condemns yeast, referring to it as leaven, and the esoteric significance of cleansing the body aligns eerily well with modern detox science. Was ancient wisdom, hidden beneath the metaphor of demons and spirits, actually a recognition that humans had to fight off invasive forces? Forces too small to see, but powerful enough to drive the mind into madness? It's not just fasting either. Ancient exorcisms often involve strange physical rituals: shaking, sweating, chanting, or drinking foul-tasting brews. Today, scientists would call that detoxification. Certain herbs used in exorcisms, like wormwood or black walnut, are still recognized in herbal medicine as powerful anti-parasitic agents. Now imagine someone in ancient times recovering from a parasite infection after one of these rituals. Of course, the community would assume a demon had been expelled. They didn't have microscopes. They had mythology. And maybe that's how these stories of possession took hold, because from the outside, the symptoms looked identical to someone driven mad by a malevolent entity. I can already feel the pushback bubbling up. Surely, parasites can't explain all possessions, you might say. Fair point. I'm not claiming every exorcism or spiritual experience is a case of microbial manipulation. But what if many of them are? What if parasites and pathogens have been the real culprits all along, riding the currents of human belief, cloaked in superstition and operating in plain sight? And if parasites can influence cravings, moods, and mental health, how much of what we think of as ourselves is truly us? This rabbit hole is only just opening. Stick with me, and let's take this all the way down. Let's go further down the timeline. Think of medieval Europe, a period obsessed with the devil's influence. People were tied to beds, beaten, prayed over, and even burned for displaying signs of possession. Cases like Anneliese Michel, the German girl who underwent brutal exorcisms in the 1970s, became infamous. She reportedly spoke strange languages, convulsed uncontrollably, and refused food, all classic signs of possession. But what if this wasn't spiritual? Michelle was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. But here's the wild part. Epilepsy has long been associated with parasitic infections, particularly from a tapeworm called Taenia solium. This parasite lodges itself in the brain, causing seizures, hallucinations, and personality changes. Suddenly, that demonic growl sounds a lot like a symptom of neurocysticercosis, the disease caused by tapeworms burrowing into brain tissue. Could it be that Annaliese's exorcism was tragically misdirected, and the real demon in her skull had a biological name? Of course, it wasn't just Europe. In ancient Mesopotamia, texts mention asaku, demons attacking the head and causing sickness. It doesn't take much imagination to see these references as descriptions of parasites wreaking havoc. Asakas were said to bring fever, nausea, and altered consciousness, symptoms that align eerily well with malaria or other protozoal infections. And what about those sudden outbursts of violence or frenzied behavior that exorcists reported? Certain parasites, like Toxoplasma gondii, affect the amygdala, the brain's fear center, leading to aggression or reckless behavior. Imagine being a priest in ancient Sumer, witnessing someone thrashing wildly, eyes vacant and unseeing. You wouldn't call it a parasite. You'd call it a demon. And here's a more recent example: rabies. Before Louis Pasteur discovered a vaccine in the 19th century, rabies victims were thought to be possessed. And it's easy to see why. Rabies doesn't just infect the body, it alters behavior, pushing the host into bouts of paranoia, violence, and hydrophobia. Sound familiar? It's the kind of frantic, terrifying behavior often described in possession cases. Victims bite and claw at others as though driven by an evil force, but the truth is more horrifying. It's not the devil making them do it. It's a virus compelling them to spread it to another host. Rabies might be the closest thing we have to a biological metaphor for possession, a parasite using aggression as a vehicle to survive and propagate, just like the demons of old mythologies. The gut-brain axis opens a whole new chapter in the story. The vagus nerve is the superhighway that connects your gut to your brain, and scientists are only now beginning to understand how much control gut bacteria and parasites have over our emotions. Imagine this: parasites inside your intestines manipulate your cravings, nudging you to consume more sugar or alcohol, their preferred fuel. Candida, for example, feeds on sugar and often creates powerful cravings to keep itself alive. But that's not all. Gut imbalances have been linked to depression, anxiety, and even schizophrenia. Is it possible that many of the behaviors once attributed to demonic influence were really the work of microscopic hitchhikers steering human hosts from the inside out? If that doesn't make you question free will, this will. Do parasites control more of your life than you think? Ancient stories tell of demons whispering temptation into human ears, leading people into sin. But what if it wasn't temptation? What if those voices were cravings driven by parasites in your gut, manipulating you to consume more of what keeps them thriving? When someone in ancient times fell under the sway of these cravings, it might have looked a lot like demonic possession. Their personality would change, their behavior becoming erratic or self-destructive. But in reality, it was the same thing that's happening in modern kitchens and grocery aisles. You reach for that sugary snack or that third drink, thinking it's you making the choice. But is it? Or is something inside you pulling the strings? Ancient priests and shamans may not have had microscopes, but they saw the effects of possession up close, and what they saw terrified them. The thrashing bodies, the uncontrolled cravings, the sudden shifts in personality. They interpreted these behaviors through the lens of their culture and beliefs, and they did what they could. They performed exorcisms, fasted, chanted, and prayed. But now, in the age of science, the metaphor of possession is being stripped away. And what's left? Something even more disturbing: parasites operating in the shadows, just as invisible and just as insidious as the demons of legend. And the question remains: are you really in control, or have you been possessed all along? So where does this leave us? Are demons just parasites hiding in plain sight, puppeteering their human hosts from the inside out? If parasites are behind behaviors that ancient cultures feared as possession, what does that say about free will? Modern science tells us that these microscopic invaders can alter mood, trigger cravings, and even manipulate decision-making. And yet, for thousands of years, humans waged spiritual wars, trying to cast out unclean spirits that might have been nothing more than colonies of pathogens, keeping their hosts trapped in cycles of fear, violence, and addiction. The chilling reality is this: we've always believed we were locked in a cosmic struggle for our souls. But what if the real battle has been happening inside us all along, against demons with legs, fangs, and spores? It's a sobering thought, isn't it? Ancient exorcists once saw themselves as the last line of defense between good and evil. Today, modern doctors and scientists play a similar role, though their enemies go by different names: Toxoplasma, Candida, and Rabies, to name a few. We've traded the Holy Cross for antibiotics and incantations for probiotics, but the goal is the same: to regain control of the body and mind. The invisible forces that hijack us may no longer wear the mask of demons, but they are just as cunning, just as dangerous, and just as hard to purge. And perhaps that is the real message hidden in the ancient rituals, one that speaks across time. The enemy within must be expelled, or it will take everything from you. There's another layer to this, though. If parasites influence behavior, where does that leave the concept of sin, guilt, or redemption? If your cravings and impulses are not entirely your own, if parasites are pulling the strings, does that mean humans are less responsible for their actions? Or does it mean you need to fight even harder to reclaim control? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are necessary ones. The concept of possession, whether spiritual or biological, has always been a way for humans to explain why we sometimes lose control, hurt the people we love, or self-destruct. The stories may differ, but the fear is the same. And understanding what's really going on inside us might be the first step toward breaking free. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. Because if parasites are at the root of possession, it means that nothing is sacred, no boundary between body and invader, no firewall between thought and infection. It's not just ancient priests battling demons in dusty temples. It's all of you, every day, trying to fight off cravings, impulses, and moods that you don't fully understand. The monsters aren't just under your bed, they're inside your brain, your gut, your bloodstream. And you can't cast them out with prayer alone. Maybe the war between good and evil has always been biological. Maybe it's been happening in the quiet corners of your body this entire time, while you believed you were in control. Thank you for sticking with me through this journey, one that started as a simple comment and spiraled into something much deeper and stranger than I could have imagined. The next time you hear someone talk about possession, remember this: it might not be demons or spirits driving people to madness. It could be something smaller, subtler, and far more insidious. So what do you think? Are parasites the real puppeteers behind the ancient myths of possession? Or is there something more going on, something we haven't discovered yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And hey, if this video rattled your brain or made you rethink everything you thought you knew, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe if you're into wild theories, mind-bending discussions, and unraveling the invisible forces that shape your life. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay in control if you can.